You'll notice a few changes in the program this morning because early yesterday morning I got an email indicating that Randall Wallace would be available to be with us this morning. So it's my privilege to welcome back to Rivermont Avenue Baptist Church the person that many of you know as Randall Wallace, the famous director, producer, screenwriter, and author. But some of you here remember him simply as Evelyn's boy, Randy. Because Randall Wallace grew up in this church. I didn't meet Randall until I officiated at his mother's funeral a few years ago, but I've long admired his work. I remember watching Pearl Harbor at a theater with my wife and parents, and Joyce and I still chuckle about a dramatic moment when U.S. airmen are launching a counterattack and the Japanese are on the defensive, and my mom, for whom Pearl Harbor was a vivid childhood memory, shouted out in the crowded theater, "Now we'll get them." Then there was a time when we took our grandsons to see Secretariat, and it was so much fun to watch the excitement in my grandson Jonathan's face as the great horse ran away with the final leg of the Triple Crown. Because unlike his grandpa, Jonathan didn't know how the race would end. My old childhood friend Bob Yarbrough did his PhD years ago at the University of Aberdeen in Scotland. Some years later, for his 20th wedding anniversary, he took his wife back to Scotland and they looked up some old friends. And during the intervening years, the movie Braveheart had been released. So Bob asked one of those old Scottish friends, how was this movie received in Scotland? And the friend said, "Well, I saw it in a packed theater. And at that dramatic moment when William Wallace is literally being disemboweled, and he cries out with a loud voice, 'Freedom!' Every man, woman, and child in the theater as one jumped to their feet and roared." Finally, it was shortly after I came to this church that I learned of its connection with Randall Wallace. Well, I had a DVD of the movie We Were Soldiers, one of my favorites. So I watched it again. And then I did something that I rarely ever do. I watched it with the director's commentary playing in the background. And there's a scene in the movie that was shot on location at Fort Benning, Georgia, in the Fort Chapel. And in his commentary, Randall talked about the beautiful stained glass windows in the chapel and how much he admired them. And I smiled to myself and I thought, I know where he learned to love stained glass windows. Welcome home, Randy.
And the emotions that love this church. The last two times I've been here, they were my mother's funeral. Thank you. My father's funeral. And with all the sadness that brings to me, there's so much joy that happened for me here. It still does. I got to see friends that I grew up with just what I want. And it really irritates me to look so much younger than I do. And I did. I sat and looked at that stained glass window, and I don't think I've ever made a movie that I wasn't remembering the window with the 3 crosses. Some years ago, when we were doing We Were Soldiers, I feed back here. You're good. Sorry, okay. We're doing We Were Soldiers, and Jimmy Carter was teaching Sunday school at the church in Americus, Georgia. And I knew somebody that knew him, so I went over to see him do the Sunday school class. And it was funny for me because some of you here knew my mother. And I had said to her when Jimmy Carter was running for president, "Mama, you're going to vote for Jimmy Carter, aren't you?" We were sitting at the kitchen table on East Woodside. And Mama goes, "No." My mother never raised her voice. As many of you know, a lot of y'all know, Mama never raised her voice. But she did then. She sort of involuntarily went, "No." And I went, "Well, why not?" And she said, "Why would I?" And I said, "Well, he's a Baptist, like us. And he's a Southerner, like us." And Mama said, "If he was running for Baptist, I'd vote for him." I went to see Jimmy Carter. And I admired Jimmy Carter. And I walked into the church. And my friend knew the Carter family and had saved a seat right next to Mrs. Carter, and one that I tremendously admire. And so I'm sitting next to Rosalind Carter and Jimmy Carter. It's a church about the size of this one, and it was packed. And he said, "Open your Bible to a certain passage." Well, for that very scene that Glenn is talking about in the church at Fort Benning, I had wanted to use "Christ the Solid Rock" as a hymn. So I wanted to check the hymnal and get the words exactly right. So being a Baptist, I had read the Bible every day of my life. I was taught to do that in this church. And I knew the passage he was going to read from the Bible, so I just opened the hymnal and was looking at the words of the hymn. And Mrs. Carter touched my elbow and handed me her Bible, open to the proper passage. And I realized that she thought, since I was a Hollywood movie maker, I didn't know the difference between a hymn book and a Bible. And I tell everyone it was at that moment that I thought I could steal Mrs. Carter's Bible and sell it on eBay. She'd given me her Bible, but that's another story. People do not associate guys who make movies in Hollywood with Christianity, with walking with Jesus. They just don't. The world doesn't. And my journey toward that was right here. Now I have to admit a few things. Some to keep me from crying, and some that still make me grin. We always sat over on this side. You know how it is when you're in church, you just kind of get proprietary about your pew. We always sat on the left side, and my left, your right. And I would get a pack of Lifesavers at the start of every, between Sunday school and church, I'd walk over to the service station with a pack of Lifesavers, and I had time that I could eat one every 6 minutes and finish right on time at the church. Until my father started stealing my Lifesavers, because he loved them too. And while I was a kid, and when I was a child, I spoke as a child and understood as a child. The passion that was in this church just made me more alive. And when I try to describe to people what it is I do in a movie, it is absolutely true that I am looking for a movie to create in the audience's hearts what I would feel when I would sit here. The music, and it thrills me so much to see music now be so alive with you as it was for me then. We didn't have a band. I got to tell you guys, I approve. We only had an organist. We never had any other instruments. Drums for us in those days would have scandalized us. And we came in here and walking with Glenn, and Glenn did such a great gift for my family at my mother's funeral. And I was trying, just don't get emotional, don't get emotional, don't get emotional. And then you started playing in Christ Alone, and I just lost it. So the power of the embrace of the Holy Spirit is so powerful in this church, and has always been for me. But it's not just that charismatic thing. There's been a recognition for me, and it started here too. Albert E. Sims was the pastor when I was here, and I know some of you recall him extremely well. He never let anyone call him Reverend or Doctor. He was always Mr. Sims, but he was tremendously dignified and passionate about the faith. And when I decided that I was going to major in religion and even go on to divinity school, I had a meeting with him in his office. I was about 17. And he said, Randy, and he had known me for half my life. He said, Randy, do you feel the call to be a pastor? And I had wrestled with that for a long time. And I said, he was not the kind of man you could lie to, by the way. He was the kind of man that knew what the truth was already, I think. And I really struggled to choke out the words, no, sir, I don't. The truth is, I don't. But I know it's the greatest calling anyone could have. And he said, you're wrong. The greatest calling anyone can have is the call God has for you. That was so important to me, to be reminded by my pastor that, and forgive me the emotion that this brings up, but you know, you think that people don't feel. Glenn was telling a great story just before the service started about being with having churches in places where people were Scandinavian or German, and they were very stoic. And one of the things I so love about Southerners is they'll tell you if they love you, and they'll tell you if they don't. There's so many people that just don't show you when they're in pain, and they don't show you when they're happy. And to have Mr. Sims tell me that God had a plan for me, and that was what I should do, that I was right to do it, that what that did for me is that it enabled me to go out into the world and say, my duties are no less because I'm not ordained. I'm no less a Christian. And I would have no greater obligation if I were ordained. I would just have a different one, a special one. And even in that has made me so appreciative of what the men and women like Glenn and all of your staff here do. Another little anecdote, and I apologize for being scattered, but I'm scattered this morning. When we had Heaven is for Real, I went around to different churches, and I don't know how many of you saw that movie, but it's a story of a pastor whose son has a near-death experience, and then he starts talking about what heaven is like, and the pastor doesn't know what to make of it. And that's the heart of the movie. And I would go to churches and speak about this, and at the end of my talk, there'd be maybe 100 people lined up and some of them wanted to give me a hug and shake my hand, and I loved that. It was wonderful. Maybe 25 of them want to tell me that their lives would make a wonderful movie. And I love that too. I mean, that's the way we should feel. But about, I don't know, a half dozen would tell me that they had lost a child. And in the sense that what a pastor goes through every day, about how we lean on them and we think that we're the only ones with this problem, but they are finding it all the time, has made me feel that one of the greatest things we can do is pray for our pastors and see them as people, that you know, they lose their parents, they want to cry some mornings, they're looking for faith too. And Mr. Sims saying to me that God had a calling for me really helped me. And so when I go into meetings in Hollywood, or when I'm, you know, by the way, I don't believe in people talking politics from the pulpit. I don't. I don't think that's appropriate. But my politics are different from most of Hollywood's. And what I find is that I get a chance to look them in the eye and say, it has never bothered me to be the only one in the room who is right. And they look at me like they think I'm crazy. And I like that too. Last night at Liberty, we were able to show the film that we've been working on for a while. And Desmond Doss, a Lynchburger, that I didn't even know about. And somebody said to me, is this guy typical? This man was a medic who went out and they tried to run him out of the army because they thought he was a coward. But he ended up saving over 100 men on the battlefield. And with unbelievable courage, I mean surreal courage. And it wasn't just the courage, it was the physically weighed about 145 pounds. And he dragged 100 men off a battlefield. And somebody said to me, you know, is this like unusual? I said, all Virginians are tough, just like that. It's just the way it is. Come down to my hometown, you're going to see all these people. What I really wanted to do this morning, and forgive me for the rambling and the struggle that I've had to stand here. It was 50 years ago, a half a century, when I was last in this pulpit as the youth pastor. And I preached an absolutely horrendous sermon, which may have been why Mr. Sims was relieved. He had the grace not to wipe his forehead and say, when I asked he asked if I wanted to be a pastor. But I just want to say to y'all that what we do in life, I think, we struggle to feel that our lives matter. We struggle with the sense that we all feel like we ought to be doing more. We ought to have a bigger impact on the world. We should. And I think one of the the biggest things that I would like to share is the sense that it's all in the hands of God, and that we offer our hands to God. And whether God uses it, whether our hand becomes his hand, is up to God. And what we are free then to do is to feel what I would feel in my chest when we would be standing there, and God bless Baptists because of the way we sing. That, in other churches, the choir is a show. But in the Baptist church, the minister of music and the choir are there to say, we are all a congregation together, and let Christ live in our hearts. Live in our hearts. Live in our passion. Live in our joy. Because there is this march. When I think about it, I went by the cemetery on the way here. And as difficult as it is to live with loss and memories, the amazing thing about it is that the less we are afraid in this world, the more we are connected to God. And what I want to do, and what I ask you to pray for me to keep doing and keep trying to do, and I will certainly pray for you, is that we embrace the fullness of God, the joy that I've wept for about half of this time here, but I can tell you that I do it because I have this voice of love that this church has been for me and my family a place of joy. Now, why it makes me cry to say that, I can't tell you. But I know that there are some things that are so good they make you cry. And I guess more than anything else, I came there this morning to say thank you.
Randy, thank you. We love you and are so proud of what you do and what joy is given and what you created. And personally, I look forward to see what you're doing next. And good to know that there's something else to see soon. Thank you for being with us and sharing your testimony and such an important message to us all. That God has us in his hands and has a purpose for each of us. And we may do something simple, but we don't know what eternally God is doing with that. And so, what a great message. Thank you.